Real Estate Entrepreneurs Podcast. Today, we have an OG on the game. You're an OG, man. I gotta call you. I gotta call you like that, brother.
You got to call it like you see it, my friend. Call it like you see it. No
My
problem there.
friend Sherman. How do you spell? How do you pronounce your last name, Sherman?
Ragland, like the
Ragland.
sleeves. Yeah, like the sleeves is said with a D on the end. So
And the one thing I like the most is that background of yours. That's not
you
a
like that?
yeah. That's not one of those green screens with like some you know like a beach place or whatnot. Where are you at right now?
A place called Great Bay, and that's St. John on the other side, on the Caribbean, and then just chilling, just chilling. You
That's
know.
what true real estate investors do, right? They just go to St. John and run
Well,
business from there.
we hustle so we can chill, right? Got
It's
to balance, right? That's that balance.
man, I don't know about hustling anymore. I used to do that, Sherman, and now I honestly I don't do that anymore. I found a way to delegate and to empower other people and
Yep.
let them run with it and I just want to enjoy life now as opposed to like turn and burn like I used to in the past.
I
Um,
totally get it.
so people get to know you a little bit, Sherman. What can you tell us a little bit about yourself, your background, where you come from, where you grew up, that kind of stuff?
Yeah, so basically from the Washington, D.C. area. My dad was military. My mom was a school teacher. My grandfather was a West Virginia coal miner. And when my dad got out of the Army, well, he was transferred to D.C. in 1968, right after the riots, the Martin Luther King assassination riots. The riots that followed the assassination of Dr. Martin Luther King. And D.C. was kind of really a little scary because I mean, literally, could when you drove down DC, you could still smell the charred buildings and everything. And grew up had no thoughts whatsoever of going into real estate. I thought I was going to be a high school band teacher. Another story for another day, my friend. But got to college on a music scholarship, and the band the chairman of the music department brings us in. And he says, "Ladies and gentlemen, I have some very bad news." And he went on to talk about this thing that had passed. I think in California they called it Proposition 13. State of Maryland had something similar, but basically they put a cap on property taxes. And he went on to explain that basically anywhere from 70 to 80% of all money collected for property taxes go to pay for teachers. And teachers had this thing called a union. So if you basically say there's no new money coming into the school system, teachers, basically the ones who are there, say, we don't care. We're still going to get our raises. So what happens when you have no new money coming in, but you have expenses going up? You have cuts. And what always gets cut? Music, art, theater. So they were whacking like 15 of the high school band teachers across the state. So he basically brought us in and said, "Hey, there's not going to be any jobs when you graduate. So go find yourself another major." And kind of bounced around a little bit, but ultimately found that my passion was real estate. Back then, you could actually get your real estate license, and I, like many people, thought that getting a real estate license was the ticket to becoming a real estate investor. But it really wasn't. But didn't know any better at the tender age of 18, 19 years old. But was fortunate enough later on to get a scholarship or a fellowship to the business school of my choice. I went to the Wharton School of Business, got an MBA. That I get an MBA to learn how to do real estate investing, which I did not. But I did wind up getting. I'll tell you, you ain't gonna learn this stuff in a classroom.
Yeah.
Uh, but I did wind up working for a big time real estate developer, and after a couple of years of doing that, got very frustrated because only person getting rich in the office was him, not me. So a couple of years later, I quit and started my own company. Been a real estate investor since 28, 29. So ever since. So it's good life.
Good deal, man. So what actually got you into real estate? What was that thing that you said, maybe I gotta go the real estate route?
I met a guy. His name was Jim Rouse. You talk about OG Rouse Company, and he wanted to hire me right about the same time I was graduating from college. And I told him he brought me out for a whole day of interviews. Really sort of turned it up, and really enjoyed it. At that point in time, I did not know what I wanted to do after graduating from college, but he really turned me on to the whole real estate space. He was a commercial real estate developer specializing in downtown retail properties, and they built several successful properties: Harbor Place, Faneuil Hall, South Street Seaport. And I remember I told him that I was thinking about going on to get my MBA, and he said to me, Sherman, you're never going to learn real estate sitting in a classroom. You learn it by doing it. And I think he really was the one who planted the seed of something in real estate, but something that went beyond just getting out there and putting kids in the back of my Mercedes with ice cream, hawking houses like a real estate agent. He was the one that really sort of showed me there was a much bigger picture.
Man, that was an amazing way to put it, right? Like you're never gonna learn how to do real estate by sitting in a classroom. You're gonna learn by doing it.
So true. So true.
So that's what got you into like, okay, I'm gonna go do real estate. So the first thing you did was become an agent, right?
Well, I got my license, but I never really did the quote unquote agent thing. I
Right.
mean, I do have a brokerage firm. It specializes in working with investors, and for the longest time, I'd have people come to me say, "Hey, can we hang our real estate license with you?" And I'm like, "No." But what I did learn along the way is that probably for most people, what I call the frustrated newbie, somebody who spent a lot of money and they're still trying to get traction, still trying to get started in the business. One of the secrets, and I learned this actually from a guy who was a high school dropout. Um, One of the secrets to really getting going in this business is to focus on a little known niche called hacking the MLS. And what a lot of people don't realize is that real estate agents have to present all written offers, and real estate agents through something called the MLS, multiple listing service, control 80% of the market. And so, one of the best ways to get started is to learn how to hack the MLS and then put that on autopilot, because real estate agents have a standard way of doing business. They have a standard way of submitting offers through something called MLS. And that's something that's very easy to do using virtual assistants, which, of course, we all know about today. But when I started hacking the MLS back in my 30s, most people had never heard of it. But it's a great way to get started if you're a frustrated newbie. You won't make the most amount of money and you won't find the best deals, but it is something that you can basically get started right away and then put it on autopilot. I think there's a much better way to get bigger checks, but that's a secret between you and me, Ricardo. We won't talk about that today, unless you know.
I'll tell you what, man. When I first started investing in real estate, I started buying from wholesalers, but somewhere around 2000, I would say 11. So I started in 2008. So around 2012, 13, um, the deals that I was getting from the wholesalers, they weren't all that great,
Yeah,
and I would spend hours analyzing these deals, and I was like, where is my profit? Like all the profit staying with the wholesaler. So
right.
I went and started looking for properties on the MLS, and I created my own MLS hacking technique, which was, let's say, like I live in the Houston area. So at the time in Houston, the price per square foot was $120
Yep.
average. Okay. That's average. Like that, a 3 bedroom, 2 bathroom, 1,500 square foot house, normal neighborhood. That was it. 120. That was the ARV. So I figured, okay, if I want to find properties for less than 50 cents on the dollars, I need to get it for less than $60 a square foot. And
Makes sense.
that's gonna give me a little bit of buffer to for the repairs and the renovations. And believe it or not, Sherman, I was finding properties left and right, in multiple areas of Houston. Now, I was getting into sometimes bidding wars with other people
Sure.
for the same properties, but I think the bulk of my properties that I bought in between 2013 and 2015 and a half around, it was all from the MLS.
Yeah. Yeah. It's I mean it's 80% of the market in most markets. There's very few cities, townships, counties where realtors don't control 80% of the market. So to not look at the MLS, to not have an MLS strategy, to not have some technique to hack the MLS, I think for the most part is foolish. And for those quote unquote gurus who run around telling everybody stay away from real estate agents, I don't think they really know what they're talking about. Because like you and I would not hop on an airplane and the pilot says, "I'm sorry, ladies and gentlemen, we only have 20% of the fuel necessary to get to our destination." We'd like, no, go back to the gate and let me off. Well, if something represents 80% of the market, you better have a strategy for going after those deals. And it's going to get even better. I don't know if you've had many conversations about the recent National Association of Realtors lawsuit and their $480 some million settlement, but that to me is a real game changer in favor of real estate investors. That whole situation of sellers agents no longer including a 3% commission for the buyer's broker, that means that a whole lot of deals are going to sit there, especially the crappy ones, the bank REOs, the probates, the stuff that really what we investors want. Those deals are really going to sit there and meander and linger unless, of course, somebody gets in there. And I think that's going to be a huge windfall for us investors.
Now, you know what, and I'm happy you brought up that point, because that was a point that I was hoping to get a lot more clarity during the family mastermind we just had
Yeah,
last week,
yeah.
and I didn't hear anything from anybody.
Well, they wouldn't hand me the microphone. Otherwise, we would have had a session after the session, because there was a couple of points that were made during. And I love family. You know,
Yeah.
I love family. I love my family. Love you, love all the guys. But I think some of the stuff coming off that stage for that session was completely wrong, and we can be wrong, and we can admit that we're wrong. But they didn't really give us much of a chance to really sort of respond. But the two things I would have responded to is, number one, this whole National Association of Realtors thing and this $486 million settlement to prevent $1 trillion in lawsuits creates a huge train wreck for the real estate brokerage industry. And it's not going to get worked out in 3 months. It's probably going to get worked out more like 3 to 5 years. It's going to be years before they work this out. And that's sort of number one. And the second big thing that they talked about, and I don't know if we got time to talk about today, was this whole notion that wholesalers should be made to get a license, which is poppycock and ridiculous. And we can talk about that too. But yeah, I think there was a couple of things that were said that I think it was worthy of a further debate and further conversation.
So you say it's going to take 3 to 5 years to come into a resolution, right, on this lawsuit, I guess.
I think so. Well, I mean, basically, fundamentally, what the lawsuit said, it was multiple lawsuits, and the National Association of Realtors was looking at $1 trillion in fines, plus the Department of Justice was starting to come after them again after having recently agreed to settle a lawsuit. The Department of Justice reopened the lawsuit because of the business practice. And if anybody's not familiar with the business practice, what the business practice was the National Association of Realtors was encouraging listing agents, encouraging listing agents to bundle in a 6% commission, whereby the listing agent or the person representing the seller would get X percent, usually around 2 or 3%, and the person who brought the buyer would get the rest. And that prevented the buyer from having to come up with extra money to pay their agent a commission, because fundamentally the selling agent was paying both sides of the commission. What happened was there's a lawsuit, and this guy had been suing the National Association of Realtors for almost 40 years. 40 years he's been coming at him. And every time he's lost up until last May he won. And when he won the first one, it was like a $300 million fine. And as soon as he won that first lawsuit, he found the secret sauce. As soon as he won the first one, he filed multiple lawsuits in multiple states and multiple jurisdictions. So the National Association of Realtors was fighting these lawsuits. I think at last count, they had about 30 lawsuits against them that was over $1 trillion in fines had they lost, like the first case. So they went ahead and settled, and part of the settlement, they said that they would dismantle that business practice. So from going forward, real estate agents who hire buyers agents, they have to now basically pay their own commission. It's a little more complicated than that, but fundamentally that's what it's coming down to. So that means the buyer is not only going to have to be pre-approved by the lender for the amount they can borrow for the purchase, but now they have to come up with the additional 3% to pay their agent. If they don't, that agent is quite frankly not going to necessarily work with them. In addition to which, the buyer's agent doesn't automatically get a 3% commission from the seller when the seller sells the house. They have to basically look and see if the seller's willing to pay that. And what's happening is all across the country, different legislatures are passing laws to prevent the seller. So like in Maryland, we got a proposed law right now that would actually prevent sellers from paying the buyer's commission. So it's a real train wreck, in my opinion, right now. And I think it's going to take a while to work itself out. Why is it a train wreck? Well, certain loans, like VA loans, the buyer's not allowed to pay anything.
That's right.
Certain FHA loans, the buyer's not allowed to pay anything, or it's very limited. So
and the concessions are lower, actually.
Absolutely. So it's just going to make it more expensive for the buyer to buy a house, because now all of a sudden they're having to pay all these fees and the sellers are not necessarily going to be given concessions. I think the other side of it is sellers are now going to have to be counseled that you don't have to pay the buyer's agent. And I think a lot of sellers are going to mistakenly say, well, if I don't have to pay it, why should I pay it? I won't pay it. And what we all know as insiders is that it's the buyer's agent who's the one that really makes the deal work. The seller gets the listing, right? The seller's agent gets the listing. That's why they're called the listing agent. And it's really the buyer's agent that makes sure they get to the settlement so that they can get paid. And if there's nothing in it for the buyer's agent coming from the seller, A, that buyer's agent is not going to show that seller's house. Why should they? And B, they're not going to be highly motivated to work with that buyer. They're going to basically start steering them, although that's a dirty word in the real estate brokerage community, because in certain kinds of steering is illegal. But they're going to start steering them to deals where the seller is paying the commission. And I think a lot of sellers in the short run are going to say they're not going to pay it because they don't have to pay it. But then they're going to realize, you know what? If I don't pay it, my house is going to sit on the market for 2 weeks, 3 weeks, 4 weeks, 6 weeks, 9 weeks, 12 weeks. Then all of a sudden they'll be like, well, how come my house is sitting so long? My neighbor's house sold in like 2 days. Oh yeah, your neighbor offered a 3% commission to the buyer's agent in addition to the 3% for the seller's agent. You're not. You're only offering a 3% to the seller's agent. Therefore, there was nobody motivated to show your house on the other side of the table. So I think it's going to take a while for that to kick in and people to realize that not paying the buyer's commission is really kind of foolish.
How do you think it's going to end up working out for the agents?
I think in the end, sellers agents, listing agents who do a really good job at listings are going to make out like fat rats. And here's why. There's a second thing that was going on while all these lawsuits were popping up like mushrooms. There's a company out there called CoStar Group. I'm sure you're familiar with it. CoStar Group is the dominant force in private MLS kind of listing services. They're a software company. So CoStar dominates the commercial real estate space. They had a big time competitor about 15 years ago called LoopNet. They bought them out. They bought out they bought out apartments.com. And most recently, they bought out homes.com in addition to several of these sort of listing services that a lot of MLSs were using. A lot of people don't realize the MLS, the multiple listing service, is not owned by the board of realtors. The MLS is owned by individual boards of realtors or contractors who have contracts with the various different boards of realtors. And what's happening over the past 15, 20 years is that MLSs have been gobbled up. So like an example, in the DC space, we have something called Bright MLS, which is a conglomerate that basically goes all the way from New York City all the way down to North Carolina. So all the MLSs in between got bought up by this Bright MLS. Well, HomeSnap was sort of an add-on tool that we were using. Zillow is another example, where if a consumer goes to a Zillow or HomeSnap, they would see multiple real estate agents associated with that property. And what was happening is those real estate agents were paying money to Zillow, paying money to HomeSnap, to have their profile featured for those listings. They were not the actual listing agents. They were just being featured. So consumers, not knowing any better, would basically call one of those agents, whoever paid the most amount of money, said, hey, can you sell me that house? They're like, sure, sign my buyer broker agreement. And then they would negotiate with the seller's agent. And nobody was the wiser. Well, CoStar Group has a fundamental philosophy of not doing what Zillow does, of not doing what HomeSnap did. So they bought homes.com, and then homes.com bought up all these other software services, so that homes.com is going to become the 800-pound gorilla in the single family house space. CoStar Group's philosophy from the day they were founded almost 30 plus years ago is only the listing agent should be listed on those websites, not all these other agents who are basically paying money to be profiled. So what does that mean? At the same time that the National Association of Realtors is doing this settlement and basically telling listing agents, hey, tell your clients they don't have to pay the buyer brokerage fee, homes.com is now quickly becoming the predominant way that the consumers find houses for sale by just searching the internet. So what's going to happen is when the consumer searches the internet and sees homes.com, they're only going to see one agent, the actual true listing agent. They're going to call that listing agent up, and that listing agent is going to say, hey, are you represented? And they're going to like, what are you talking about? Like, do you have an agent you work with? No, I don't. Okay, great. You can work with me. And they will. So now that listing agent no longer has to share their commission. So if they convince their seller to pay a 2, 3, 4% commission, or 2, 3% commission plus a 1% commission bonus, and now all of a sudden there are no other agents involved, they're going to get all the money. So those listing agents that are really, really good at listing and really, really good at getting their profile set up on homes.com, they're going to have consumers coming directly to them, unrepresented, with no real estate agent in the middle. On the surface, that sounds like a really good thing for the listing agent, and it probably is. And on the surface, they'll make a lot more money. But behind the scenes, it's not really a good thing, because there's something in real estate brokerage called fiduciary responsibility. And that's one of the things that we teach, one of the things that we use when we hack the MLS. The agent, whoever hires the agent, regardless of how they're being paid, is responsible for what's called a fiduciary responsibility. So in other words, a listing agent, if they're talking to a buyer who finds them on the internet, and the buyer says, "Hey, I think I want to offer $300,000 for the house," and the agent says, "Well, can you go higher?" "Yeah, I can probably go as high as 385, but I just want to offer 300 for now." Well, by law, that listing agent has to tell the client, the seller, "Oh, this person could go to 380." And I think what's going to happen is you're going to have a whole lot of people going to the settlement table, and they're going to be like, "How did you know that I was willing to pay 380 for the house?" "Oh, the agent told me." "Well, what do you mean the agent told you?" "I told the agent that in confidence." "No, you told the agent that and said, please don't tell, but because of the fiduciary responsibility, by law, they had to tell." And a lot of people don't really understand that word fiduciary responsibility. The agent who represents the seller must tell the seller everything, even if you, the buyer, say, please don't tell them this. And I think a lot of people are going to be surprised when they find out that everything they're telling that agent is going straight back to the seller.
That yeah, I think you're right. It creates a whole can of worms that moving forward. I mean, the listing agent is they're. I guess what's happening is they're making the listing agent stronger.
It will.
Um,
Absolutely, it will. Absolutely will.
and the buyers agents, they're just like they gotta be real good at capturing buyers now.
Well, it's what I tell my agents. It's like, would you rather have one buyer who pays you 3% and you never hear from them again on a $300,000 house? Or would you rather specialize in working with investors, knowing that the investor is going to want you to beat up the buyer, beat up the seller, and maybe instead of paying 300, they'll only pay 250, but they're going to do 2 or 3 transactions with you over the course of a year. And everybody's like, well, I'd rather be with the one that's going to do $750,000 in business with me, not the one that's going to do 300. I said, exactly. So I think what's going to happen is 2 things. One, a lot of buyers are just going to drop out of the business because this is no longer a lazy person's game. It's going to be dog eat dog, knockdown, drag out. And number 2, I think the smart buyer's agent, the smart real estate agent who represent buyers, is going to be smart enough to realize I'm better off representing somebody who's going to do multiple transactions with me, not a one and done, and I never hear from them again. And if that be the case, because now they have to fight for their commission and they have to get the commission from their client, not get it from the property that's listed in MLS, I think you're going to see a whole lot more buyer agents turning to working with investors. It only makes sense. And you're also going to see a whole lot more quit the business.
Of course, yeah. It's no longer I'm gonna list your house and let it sell on the MLS or like me personally, I never been an agent and
Yep.
I don't want to be one. Like
Yeah.
I don't like opening and closing doors. I don't like the whole house showing,
Totally get
the
it.
babysitting a buyer through 10 houses so they can say later on, oh, we just decided to rent, right?
Totally get it.
So I'm
But answer this for me. Would you object to paying a commission to an agent as long as the agent got you the house for the price you wanted?
it's I guess it all depends on the situation, right? So like I'll give you an example.
Mm-hmm.
I built a house like 10 years ago
Mm-hmm.
and I went to the builder and I said, look, I'm a real estate investor. I want to build a house. I don't have an agent.
Mm-hmm.
Will you credit that agent's portion of the commission towards the purchase price of the property? And I will gladly go and do business directly with you without the agent because I don't need an agent to fill out the paperwork and to do all the things for me. I know how to do all of that. And the agent at the time, his name is David. We're great friends now. He
Yeah.
said, Ricardo, unfortunately, here in this company, I'm not gonna mention any names.
Yeah.
We're not allowed to do that.
Right.
So if you don't bring an agent, we're just gonna get the full commission.
Exactly.
And I said,
Exactly.
bingo, I'll just bring a friend. And literally, I looked at my phone and I said, who do I want to make? It was like a $550,000 transaction. Who do I
Right.
want to make 20 grand? And I called a friend of mine and I said, hey, man, do you want to come here and be my agent? Right.
Right.
And,
Listen. Yeah. I've never met a single investor who says, I will not pay a wholesaler if the wholesaler brings me the deal at the price I want. So I've never met a single real investor who says, I'm not going to pay a wholesaler because I object to the principle of paying somebody a fee to
Oh
bring me
no,
the
no,
vehicle.
no, no. I'll pay.
You with me?
I'll pay
You with me?
whoever. Like if I want something and they bring it to me, and that's it. Let's
Right.
do it. Right.
So this is my point. As investors, we're used to paying people to bring us deals. So we would have no problem whatsoever paying an agent a buyer commission as long as they bring us the deals we want at the price we want. Homeowners, first time homeowners who are on very limited budgets, are not going to be that generous. They
I
may not
think
have,
I
they
think
may not have an
homeowners are
extra
gonna get
2%.
screwed. That's it.
Absolutely.
They're gonna get
Absolutely, they're going to get
screwed.
screwed.
They're
let,
gonna
let me
get
tell
screwed.
you, let me tell you something. You called me OG, but that's a badge of honor. What a lot of people don't realize is we did not always have buyer brokers in this country. Historically, going back to the 80s and before, the 70s and 60s and 50s, we had something called sub agency, where it was understood all the agents worked for the seller. And that's how we wound up getting buyer brokerage in the first place, because what would happen is people would go to settlement and they'd be like, how in the world did the seller get all my confidential information? I told you that my agent in confidence. And what would happen was the seller would have an agent, the buyer would have an agent, but the buyer's agent was called a sub agent. So therefore, the allegiance, the fiduciary responsibility was to the seller, not to the buyer. So that all started to change in the late 70s and early 80s with the introduction of buyer brokerage, whereby the agent had the fiduciary responsibility to the client, but the commission was still being paid for by the seller. So that's how we got here in the first place. Now we're going back to the old 70s days where people who are hiring real estate agents don't really understand. You can't trust that person because everything you tell them in confidence is going to go straight back to the seller. We're right back to where we were in the 1970s.
Wow, we're going backwards.
Absolutely. And so that's why I said anybody who sits up on a panel like they did last weekend and said, oh, this is going to work itself out in 3 or 4 months. Oh, hell no, it's not. It took us 30, 40 years to get here. Why in the world would it work itself out in 3 or 4 months? This is a massive sea change. Every real estate agent that I know of, because most of them are not OG, most of them haven't had their license as long as I have. I got my real estate license when I was 23 years old. I've had it for a very long time. But most people who got the real estate license, they don't know anything other than buyer broker and you get paid by the seller. They don't know anything other than that. So this whole new world for them is going to be very scary, and I think a lot of them are not going to, quite frankly, they're not going to make it.
Well, you know what? The good thing is during moments like this, the weak will get out, because there's no, they'll go sell insurance or do something else.
Yeah.
Um, the the ones that are hustlers, that those guys will double down on their money now, right? And
Yep.
whoever is in the middle, they'll probably just survive. But I think surviving eventually kicks them out too, because
I think so. Yeah, I think so too. And again, I think this disruptions always create winners and losers. The mortgage meltdown and Countrywide going out of business in 2008 created a bunch of winners and losers. Supply chain disruptions, COVID. This time around, the winners, I think, the big winners, I think, are going to be real estate investors, especially ones focused on single family houses. This whole disruption is going to allow us to really sort of slip in there, pay the commission to the buyer's agents, go after people who've had houses sitting on the market for 2 times, 3 times longer than what they think it should be. They're going to be moping and groping, talking about, oh, my neighbor's house sold in 2 days. But it's like, yeah, your neighbor offered a 3% commission, you didn't, and after a while they're going to get frustrated and sell it at a discount to folks like us. So
let
and
me
that's
ask,
and that's
let me ask you a
yeah.
question. Um, and this is something that I've always wondered, and I don't think I've ever asked this question to anyone else before. Why is it, or why do you think, in your opinion, that you see these brand new wholesalers coming into the business, okay? And they start cold calling, and they're very aggressive. They're cold calling all day, 8 hours a day, until they get that one deal that's gonna put $10,000 on their checking account. And then you get the agents that are coming, they have to go get licensed, and they gotta pay for their school and all that, but they don't invest in marketing. Now the wholesaler is maybe is told by a guy like you or me, or maybe somebody else, look, if you don't have any money, go ahead and pound the phones at the beginning, but as soon as you start making money, then you got to reinvest into marketing. That way you start having leads coming over to you, not you chasing the leads all the time. Why is it that I would say a big percentage of the agents don't invest in lead generation.
I think most agents are lied to be honest with you. Again, being OG, being old guard, in the old days, it was understood that the broker is going to do the marketing and you, the agent, basically get the leads from your broker and then you go run with it. And what has happened over time, especially with the proliferation of franchises like Keller Williams and Coldwell Banker, Century 21, and Exit, and et cetera, et cetera, et cetera, is that brokers, with the exception of Keller Williams, like, and they are exceptional. The exception of Keller Williams, most brokerage firms do not invest in education for their agents, and certainly don't invest any money in terms of marketing. There once was a point in time the National Association of Realtors did a lot of investment in marketing. They used to have some killer ads out there on TV. I don't know the last time I saw. Well, yeah, it was probably about 2 or 3 years ago, but it was pretty lame. But National Association of Realtors used to have this ad they ran in the '90s. It's called "The Worst Way to Sell Your House." It's like the worst way to sell your house is to sell your house. And if you, it is the worst way to sell your house. And then we go on to explain why you are at a significant disadvantage by not hiring a realtor. So I think the problem is the industry has not really, because it's been such I don't want to call it monopoly, maybe an oligopoly, maybe. It's had such a chokehold. They basically have done a good job of convincing the general public that you need a real estate agent, but not any one individual real estate agent. And it's really been up to the individual real estate agent to do their own marketing. That's really only been in the past 20 years. Like I said, in the '80s and '90s and before, the real estate broker did most of the marketing. The real estate broker was the one that handed the leads to the agent. I mean, they'd literally come into the office, they'd have these books. This is pre everybody having a desktop PC, certainly before everybody having a smartphone. And the broker would basically say, here's the leads for the day, like old school, stock brokerage firms, right? Here's the leads book, right? But what's happened is everybody in the industry has gotten a little fat and happy, because I think the general public does respect somebody having a license, not knowing the fact that a license really doesn't mean a whole lot of anything. As a licensed real estate broker who actually teaches the licensing course to get your license, I know what's in the 60-hour requirement for the state of Maryland. There's nothing in there about being an investor. And there's even less in there about making money with your license. It's all about fair housing, protecting the public. The reason that real estate agents get a license is not to make money. They get a license because the state requires it to protect the public. In the story. So they get a whole lot of, preparation for that 60 hours and preparation to go take the exam that's on fair housing and protected classes and all that kind of stuff. But there's nothing in there about investing. There's nothing in there about marketing. There's nothing in there about running it as a business, which is why so many real estate agents, quite frankly, fail. And I think that the wholesaler who really is out there hustling and doing the kinds of things that you're talking about is providing a tremendous service to the industry, because not every piece of property is a pretty piece of property. Not every piece of property is going to sell itself because it's in the right neighborhood and has the right curb appeal and has had the right prior owner who lovingly took care of it. There's a whole lot of crap out there. And without somebody out there hustling to go find it and then bring it to an investor who's got the financial resources to carry it through, either because they got private investors or hard money lenders or their own capital, those are the deals that get done. And I think a lot of real estate agents just don't have a clue about that whole world of investing and really moving quote unquote ugly properties, as Ron LeGrand might say.
So it's more of a lack of education on the agents on what it really needs to happen to create a bunch of leads. And because I'm like, that's where I specialize on lead generation. Okay. And I used to be a fix and flipper. I used to do wholesaling, and now my focus is just lead generation. And I started to think, why is it that all these agents, they're like, oh, I don't have any listings, or I don't have any.
Well, first of all, remember this: the quote unquote average real estate agent. There is a federal government website called Bureau of Labor Statistics, BLS.gov, not .com.gov, and basically they get data fed to them from the IRS based on what's called industry codes, NAICS codes. So basically, the BLS knows every occupation in this country and what the average salary is, because they get nameless, faceless data from the IRS that says that this person said on their tax return that they're a real estate agent, this is how much money they made. The average real estate agent in America makes $47,000. You with me?
Wow.
47. Wow. So this is not this high paid occupation that a lot of people make it out to be. Now, there's always the 20% of the 20%, which is roughly 4 to 5% that are out there hustling. And they do understand lead gen, and they do understand how to build a business. They do understand how to make a business. But the vast majority out there do not understand any of that stuff. So A lot of agents basically, signed up for Zillow. A lot of people don't realize that Zillow is nothing more than a lead gen source for real estate agents. A lot of real estate agents take basic classes from their multiple listing service. The MLS actually does a better job of training and coaching and teaching on marketing than the brokerage does. But then there are a handful of agents who do get it, and they have YouTube videos and YouTube channels. That was really a big play 2 or 3 years ago. The ones that started in Instagram 3 or 4 years ago, the ones that are doing TikTok today, the kind of things that you do and the kind of things that you teach. But that's probably a great source of new revenue for you, new business for you, is those buyers agents who are no longer just going to show up with a buyer and get paid a commission, probably teaching them how to do the proper lead gen to get the right kind of clients so they can actually get paid.
Amazing. I have my great friend Dan Hansen. Shout out to Dan. He's an agent down in the Sarasota area in Florida, and that he lead generate through his YouTube channel. He became the authority in the area, and he says, Ricardo, I just don't have enough people on my team to handle all the leads that we get through our YouTube channel.
Yeah. YouTube is probably a better source for local talent than, say, Facebook is. Facebook, you tend to have to be more nationwide or super regional. But I know a lot of real estate agents who have an endless pipeline. Again, it's only a handful. It's the 4% club, right? And most of them are using TikTok, Instagram, and YouTube.
All right, so now let's talk a little bit about you,
Yeah.
Sherman. How are you? What is your involvement today in our community? Are you investing in real estate? Are you teaching? Or are you doing a little bit of both? Tell us about
Yeah.
that.
So I'm coaching, teaching, mentoring, but the main thing I'm doing is transitioning. That's the dude over there in the beach chair. He just got here. He had a canceled flight, a delayed flight, so he left a day after we did. But that's my 23-year-old son. He just graduated from college, and he started in the real estate business when he was 19, just before the pandemic hit. And during the pandemic, when they kicked him off campus, along with all the other kids that were living on campus, he came home, did his studies online, found that he had way more time on his hands than he needed. And rather than getting in trouble, he decided to go out and fix and flip 5 houses his sophomore year in college. And so he got the real estate bug. And so now we're working through where I'm really sort of transitioning the business, the day-to-day operations business over to him, and sort of pruning my portfolio to make sure that when he takes over, he's got good cash flowing properties, not a bunch of junk. Because when you first get started, as you know, Ricardo, you just buy anything.
Oh yeah, I bought things with STDs, man. I look back and I'm like, why did I do that?
Because you could.
And there was always a challenge of like, I can conquer that property, and
Yeah, exactly. And usually it wound up kicking your butt.
exactly, yeah. So
As you get older and wiser, a little bit grayer, you become, hopefully somewhere along the way, you become less opportunistic and more strategic. And when you become more strategic, you start really sort of laying the foundation for generational wealth. And that's, what I've been doing for the past several years, and now I'm just sort of accelerating that. I think, if God willing, I think I got another good 20 years left, but I want to take at least the next 3 to 4 just to really sort of hand everything over to him and get him set up. So,
yep. So, but I know you have coaching programs too, right?
Yes.
Talk to me about your coaching program. What do you do in your coaching program? Who's your ideal client?
Well, I used to say my ideal client was somebody who was headed towards retirement with kids, but my son David, who's 23, really got a hold of my sort of flagship coaching program. It's kind of funny, real quick, funny story. So we used to produce it in these 2 1-inch binders with 30 CDs. You, of course, know who Tony Robbins is, right?
Right.
So Tony Robbins had a flagship program. I think it was called, oh God, what was it? Something about 21 days or something like that, or 30 days, something like that.
He's got so many of them. It's hard to remember.
Well, this is
particular one.
This is the one that he sold in infomercials and sold with Gunthy Raker for years, and sort of set the stage for everything that came later. In any event, I sort of said, one day I was going to take, my flagship intro course, which was sort of like Ron LeGrand meets Tony Robbins. And I created something called 21 Days to Real Estate Riches. And it really was a course you did over a 21-day period. Every day for an hour and a half a day, you'd go through, and it would develop the habit of you working on your real estate business an hour and a half a day for 21 days, which means when the 21 days is over, you're still in the habit of working on your business for about an hour a day. And if this is going to be something that starts off as your side hustle, but then becomes your real gig, making the commitment to spend about an hour and a half, 2 hours a day is really kind of fundamental. So long story short, we had lots of success stories. We were predominantly a brick and mortar company. We had a 10,000 square foot event space. We had people coming from all over the region. And then, of course, the pandemic broke out, and we had to sort of quickly switch from a like 100% offline to 100% online. Well, my son and his best friend came over Thanksgiving before COVID hit. So Thanksgiving 2019. And my son says to me, Dad, are you still teaching people how to do real estate? My high school buddy, Neil, wants to get in real estate. Would you be willing to talk to him? I said, sure, have him come on over when you're home for Thanksgiving break. So two of them are sitting in the kitchen. I'm talking to them. I'm vetting them. They both demonstrate that they're completely serious and sincere about it. So I'm like, okay, wait here. My office is like 7 minutes from my house. I went to the house, grabbed 2 bags, gave each one of my kit, my course, right? And I handed it to him. My son looks at it. He goes, what are these? I said, they're CDs. He says, what do I do with them? I said, you listen to them. He said, on what? I said, on your CD player. He's like, I don't have a CD player. I was like, well, then fine. Listen to him in your car.
Wow.
So his buddy Neil hits him in the shoulder. He says, we take him back to my house. We can rip him. So that was my wake-up call that, hey, maybe there's a new generation out there, and maybe this new generation that's 19, 20, 21 something doesn't want to sit around listening to a bunch of CDs. So long story short, I gave it to him. He did figure out a way to, to rip the MP3s. He wound up using it. He and his buddy Neil got their first deal done. Guess what? In 21 days.
Wow.
So he gave me the inspiration. I gave him the inspiration to get into business. He gave me the inspiration to redo the course. So the following January, I sat down and I did a 21-day challenge live, where I re-recorded the program as it should have been done in the first place. And now I make it available. So I run something, it's $19.97. I'm not trying to get rich on it, but I'm trying to I don't believe in giving anything away. I think people who get stuff for free don't really appreciate it. But everybody can come up with $1 a day for 21 days, right?
Not only that, the free stuff, Sherman, it's never free. Okay, like
no,
people think it's free and it's not. Like, I'm
it's
sorry,
never.
that's just a hook to catch you, and eventually you're gonna pay the price.
Right. So I took my flagship $2,000 course and I give it away for $20, $19.97. And people all the time are going, well, what else do I need? I'm like, you don't need anything else other than 100% commitment to make it work. Because again, that's my way of sort of giving back to this next generation. So
Right.
now, do we have other coaching programs? Of course, we have coaching programs on multifamily. We got coaching programs on commercial real estate. We got coaching programs on marketing and raising capital. But as far as just getting started in the business, that 21 days to real estate riches, that 21-day challenge is available. It's automated now. It's up online. I also offer live coaching mentoring 2 times a week. So every Tuesday night we do a coaching session. Every Wednesday night I do a coaching session for that group. And we've had some fabulous success stories, not just Dave and his business partner, Neil, but we've probably coach mentored over 2,400 students successfully in the past 2 years since we turned it into a digital product. So we're very, very proud of that. And if folks want it, they can go online. Can I give that URL out?
Absolutely.
Okay, so they can go online to 21-day quick start challenge, 21-day quickstartchallenge.com, 21-day quickstartchallenge.com. And then most recently, we partnered up with a company that has some AI technology for finding off-market deals, what we call FSBO deals. So the 21 Days to Real Estate Riches is week 1 is foundation, learn the business. If you've not been involved in the business, you didn't grow up in a real estate family, you don't know the basics. That's week 1. Week 2 is hacking the MLS. Week 3 is putting that whole thing on autopilot. So fundamentally, it's a course about how to properly hack the MLS to make deals happen quickly and then put it on autopilot. We came up with another course. It's called Cruising for Cash, and that's cruising for cash or cruising the number 4 cash. And that really goes after the FSBO deals where we give you the software. You can download the software, have it for a 14-day trial to see if you really, really like it. After 14 days, you got to pay $44 for it. But it's a 14-day trial where basically you have a mobile app and desktop software. And then over 4 days, an hour, hour and a half a day, for 3 days, 3 of the 4 days, we show you how to find deals. I have something called 101 Things to Look For when you're cruising for cash. Overgrown lawns, mailboxes falling down, trees falling down, property falling down, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And then once you identify these properties, you click the we call the click the white button. White button turns blue. So click the blue button. Click, 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 and then all those properties you identify are on your desktop. And then on the last 2 days of the program, we show you how to use the desktop software. And then on the final day of the program, so it's 4 days. On the fourth day, you actually meet with us live, and during that live session, we actually write checks for people who found deals. It's fabulous. We've been doing this now for about a month and a half, and it starts every Tuesday, and then the live session is on Friday. Obviously, the training sessions are pre-recorded. It's an hour and a half a day from noon to 1:30ish. And then there's somebody there to monitor and answer live questions Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday. But on Friday, it's a live session with the group. And we got this fabulous person. You probably heard of her, Jenna Hoover. You know Jenna?
Yep.
So Jenna hosts our Friday session, and that's where she literally works with you. And if you got something that's really amounts to a deal, we'll literally write you a check on the spot and pay you for the deals. So that's called cruisingforcash.com. So that's what I'm doing.
Hey, by the way, I posted on the comments the 21 day quickstartchallenge.com. Make sure you hit that up. If you're brand new and you're looking for an amazing coach, Sherman is one of them. He's been in the business for a very long time, and he's seen it all, right? So, you know, one of the things that I like to tell our audience is that, you know, when you hire a coach, find a coach that is walking the talk, right? Like, do they do what they say they do? Have they done it? You know, can they show results? Can they, you know? And you said it. You've been doing this for a very long time. I'm pretty sure that your students are having success today. Otherwise, you wouldn't be in St. Thomas just hanging out by the beach with the family, right?
I marked time based on him. He was born January 23 years ago, and that's when I became a real estate investor in March of the same year. And so, coaching, teaching, mentoring people for 23 years. We bought this place about 20 years ago and been coming down 2-3 times a year ever since. But yeah, I totally agree with you. Whatever real estate, like everything else, Ricardo, as you know, is really, really simple. It only takes 3 things to be successful: the right system, the right support, and 100% commitment. And the reason why most people fail is because those 3 things don't come together at the same time. The right system. There's certain systems that work better in up markets, certain systems that work better in down markets. Certain systems work no matter what the market. Stuff that you teach, stuff that I teach. The 21-day course, because it's hacking the MLS, it works in any market, up or down. If I was not doing the 21-day system, or if I was more advanced to that, I'd probably look at somebody who was teaching how to do sub 2, right? Because that's going to be the hot thing going forward for probably the next couple of years. But bottom line is this: the right system needs to have the right support. That means the right mentor and the right team around that mentor. And if you have those 2 things, you're almost there, but you still got to bring 100% commitment. And of the 3 things, commitment is the great multiplier. If you bring 0 commitment into a room with the right system and the right support, you're going to get 0 results. But if you bring at least 100% commitment and the system's okay and the mentor's okay, you're still going to make something happen. So the most important thing, people say to me all the time, well, do I need money? Do I need experience? Do I need a license? You don't need any of that stuff, but you need to come ready 100% of the time when class is open. Don't be signing up for stuff and then not showing up. Don't be signing up for stuff and then coming in late. Don't be signing up for stuff and then leaving early. There's nobody to if you're that kind of person, there's nobody to blame seriously but yourself.
I love that. I love that, man. I did during the pandemic, I did a 5-day challenge. Okay. And the 5-day challenge, what I did it was Zoom calls. It was one day I was just bored out of my mind. I was in the middle of the lockdown. And I was like, what do I do right now? You know what? I'm just going to show people how I do business, right? So I created this 5-day challenge, and it was free, 100%. Nice. But there was one thing that I asked, is that they showed up on time.
That's it, man.
If they didn't show up on time, they were not getting on the call. Yeah. Number 2, I was not recording the calls.
Yeah. Yeah.
If you were not in the call, you were not in the call, period. That was it.
That's it.
Done. That's it. You're not getting the information, right? No. And I remember I had like 150 people coming out of nowhere. But you can see on the second day, if you started with 150, the second day you got like 120. Because 30 just dropped off, right? Or they showed up late. And I was like, you know what? If you're coming in late, if you don't appreciate my time, I'm sorry. You know, because And but long story short, we kept that running for like 5 months.
Mm.
And when we said it was free, it wasn't free, because at the end of the day, I got a bunch of deals out of it.
There you
A,
go.
a
That's a
lot
fair
of them, a
trade.
lot of them bought my texting platform that I had at the time,
Yep.
and it was like a $5,000 ticket. So we made money, but that was our funnel to get them into, like, hey, this is how we do it. We're gonna show you how we use our tools, but by the way, we're gonna sell you the tools, right?
Sure.
So,
Yep.
but if
And
they
look,
were
if you
not,
get if yeah,
if they were not on time, Sherman, that was it, man. They were out.
life's too short, baby. And everybody's like, oh, well, you can give away for free. Yeah, but the most important thing that we have, especially as you get older, is our time. And none of us wants to have our time wasted. So you and I, we will give and give and give and give and give. But if we're in the room ready to give and you ain't here, you already told us you ain't interested. So why, if you're not interested, why should we be here? That's just common decency. And I know they say common decency and common sense don't exist anymore, but where I'm from, OG, common decency goes a long, long way.
Absolutely, man. And how can people get a hold of you, brother?
They can go to my website. I'm on Facebook, Sherman Ragland, the Real Investor. So on Facebook, just look up Sherman Ragland, the Real Investor. You can go to realinvestors.com. You can reach out to our office if you're kind of like a telephone person, 301-218-4333, 301-218-4333. That's a Maryland area code. But most importantly, just come on Facebook, come on Instagram, and do the 21-day challenge. I do it live. That's it. I mean, if you want to meet with me live for 2 hours a week, 2 times a week, join the challenge. It's $20. So
$20. That's it, man. I mean, it cannot get cheaper than that.
people listen. People always say, "Hey, man, can I buy a cup of coffee? Can I buy a hamburger?" Well, first of all, I don't know of any place you can get a hamburger for $20. Not even two hamburgers for $20. Not even McDonald's. And I think a cup of coffee at Starbucks is about $8. You can get me for 21 days for $19.97. So if folks are really serious about hanging out with me, put up the $19.97. It's 100% refundable, and come hang out with me on Wednesdays, for a couple of hours, and you can ask me anything you want. It's called open office hours with the dean. You can ask me anything you want. I'll answer anything that I can't answer for you, and if I can't answer for you, I'll put you in touch with somebody like Ricardo or somebody else that can answer it for you, because I don't know everything, but I know everyone.
Amazing, brother. Well, thank you so much for being here today, Sherman, at a short notice.
My pleasure.
We got to reconnect again in the next few months, because I want to bring you back to continue to talk about that whole lawsuit with the agents and NAR.
Listen, you know how to get a hold of me. Let's do it like in the next week or two when I'm back home in my studio, and I have my artificial light, because my natural light's going down over the hill. So
amazing, brother. You have a great day, man. Thank you so much for being here today. And guys, don't forget to hit share, like, and subscribe. Go find Sherman. Tell him we sent you, and we'll see you on the next one.